Oh. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. We are going to be talking about apprenticeships today. It's National Apprenticeship Week, so yeah, we're going to look at apprenticeships, what apprenticeships are. My name is Annette. I'm here on behalf of the National Apprenticeship Service, and we're putting on this event in collaboration with Bexley Council, and yeah, we just want to make sure that the aim of this session really today is to make sure that you as parents have all the information that you need to enable you to support your child through any options that they decide in their decision making. It's really important for us to make sure that we cover this, even if your child already knows what it is that they're planning to do after school. One thing that 2020 has taught us is that a lot of plans can change, and so it's important for us to make sure that we're considering all options and when it comes to making decisions. Now, a lot of you would have heard about apprenticeships before, but apprenticeships have changed significantly over the past few years, and there are some really, really brilliant opportunities available for your child. And we're going to explore a lot of that today, including degree apprenticeships as well. Now, of course, as a country, we are currently going through some uncertain times because of the coronavirus pandemic, and we recognise that you might be concerned about the number of opportunities and types of opportunities available for your child. But the government has recently announced its plan to support young people and their careers post-COVID, which includes additional funding for employers to help to increase the availability of apprenticeship vacancies across the country. So there's a lot of work that's going on to make sure that there are still lots of opportunities available. So what I'm going to explain today is what apprenticeships are, the range of different roles that are available, the different levels, how you can go about finding an apprenticeship, and what your child will need to do next to start searching and applying. Okay, so what are apprenticeships? So an apprenticeship is where you'd be working full-time and studying part-time. So in an apprenticeship, you will always be earning a wage, and it can be a really good salary as well. We'll talk a little bit more about money later on. They will work for at least 30 hours per week, and that includes paid time to complete their studies. So they wouldn't have to work their full-time hours and then find time to complete their studies on top of that. The time that allocated for their studies is factored into their full-time working hours. The employer will make sure that the apprentice gets the qualification the qualification and experience that they need, the skills that they need. They'll give them the training that they need to function in that role. They'll also get support from not just the employer, but the training provider who will be providing the qualification. So it could be a training provider or college or university, but they will also have that academic support that they need. They will have an endpoint assessment as well. So they will need to have an endpoint assessment, which is basically like the final assessment for an apprentice to ensure that they can do the job that they've been training for. And the employer will always help them to work towards that. Of course, because it's a full-time real job, they'll also have a contract of employment, including holiday pay, just like any other member of staff. And the key thing to remember is that it is a real job with a real employer. The apprentices will spend time working alongside other people, learning from their experience and receiving training. There's this kind of idea that apprenticeships are just like work experience, where you're given they'll be given basic tasks to do or asked to make the teas and coffees for everyone, but that's not the case at all. It is a real job with real responsibilities that will require the training, which is what the whole point of the apprenticeship is. As an apprentice, it would typically take them anywhere between 1 to 4 years to complete their apprenticeship. Sometimes it could be up to 6 for some areas, like a solicitor. But the total duration really just depends on the delivery model and the level and subjects that the apprentice is studying. But as a minimum, all apprenticeships last for a minimum of 12 months. And it's important to remember it's not the easy option as well. As doing an apprenticeship, it takes a certain skill, to hold down a full-time job and studying at the same time, which kind of brings me on to my next point, which is the truth around apprenticeships. There are so many myths about apprenticeships because they've been around for such a long time, but have changed so much. And as I was mentioning, you do have this kind of idea that apprenticeships is what you do if your child, fails the GCSEs or doesn't get the grades that they want, or if they're not as academic, or it's for people who aren't as smart. And of course, that absolutely is not the case. You'll find that actually apprenticeships are becoming increasingly competitive. And actually, there are some apprenticeships where the entry requirements are quite harsh or are quite strict, and the standard is quite high compared to some others. And particularly when you get to your kind of degree level apprenticeships, it can get very competitive. And again, you're balancing that work responsibilities and your academic responsibilities as well. And I say that not to kind of put you off or make it seem like it's too much work, but just so that, as with anything in life, it comes with its own challenges, and it will take its own portion of work. So it's important to remember that, and it is just as reputable and just as viable an option as far as moving forward in their academic and or professional life. So I've mentioned the salary. You can get really, really good salaries in apprenticeships that actually compete quite well with graduate salaries. It's important to remember as well that if your child does come across an apprenticeship that they're not interested, or that they are interested in, but they see that the pay is not as high as some others, because you will see some employers who offer incredible salaries, but they shouldn't be put off by that, because even if the pay is initially lower, there is often room for progression, and oftentimes these companies, the salary that they advertise is a starting salary, and then that kind of goes up each year. Of course, it does vary. Another common myth is that once you've completed your apprenticeship, your employer will let you go, and of course this isn't true. The majority of apprentices, around 90%, actually end up staying on in employment. So either in a permanent role at the employer that they're with, or maybe they're able to progress to a higher apprenticeship with the same employer, or some are even able to change to a different company. They're able to compete for perhaps a better job with more pay or more responsibility. So the prospects tend to be quite good. Social life. So lots of young people are worried that as an apprentice, they won't get to have fun or meet other young people or have the same social life that you would get to enjoy as a full-time student. This is particularly a concern for students who are thinking about going to university. Part of the appeal of university is also the kind of social side to things. And I mean, I will say that there is some truth to it, in the sense that as an apprentice, even if you do a degree apprenticeship, which I'm going to talk about now in a moment, you won't be classed as a full-time student, and so your experience, of course, will not be the same as that of a full-time student. Also, there would be a greater demand on their time because they are working and studying part-time. So, there is a greater challenge there. However, depending on the size of the company, they'll often find themselves working with loads of other young people just like them who have joined as apprentices. They will meet other people there who joined as apprentice the year before, who are perhaps in their second year, and other people who are joining at the same time. We also have networks like the Young Apprenticeship Ambassadors Network across the country, where apprentices are able to network with each other, and you can meet other people who are in the same position. And the other thing as well that it's important to remind young people that actually apprentices tend to have a pretty good social life. merely for the fact that they're actually able to afford to have one. The fact that they'll be getting paid a salary is a huge plus. I can't tell you how many times, when I was in university as a full-time university student, the lack of funds has gotten in the way of, me enjoying my social life to the extent I would have liked, So having that salary coming in is a huge plus. Now, gaining a degree, people think that if you want to, that apprenticeships are only for people who don't want to go to uni. Of course, again, that's not true. One of the biggest, changes in apprenticeships over the past years is that you can now gain a degree through an apprenticeship. So you can work in a company in a particular role and be pursuing a relevant degree or a degree in a relevant field or subject. You wouldn't have to pay for any tuition. So even if your child did a degree apprenticeship, they would not have to pay for the tuition at all. It would be fully funded for you by the company and or the government. So it would be fully funded. No, you don't need to take out any maintenance loans, tuition loans, because that will all be taken care of. Even if at some point, if your child started doing a degree apprenticeship and for one reason or the other, they had to withdraw from that program, they would not ever have to pay any of that back. So there's no financial liability on yourselves, which is always a huge plus, a huge selling point. And then the last thing is that you can relocate. So this is more so for kind of the older students, like 18 plus, who are thinking about, going to university, apprenticeships. It's important to also open their mind to the fact that they can actually look at opportunities that are outside of their local area. Naturally, whenever people are looking for job-related opportunities, we look at what's closest to us and what's available in our local communities. But, the same way that a student would apply to universities across the country in different cities, it's the same way that we would encourage them to also look at what apprenticeships are available in other cities. And oftentimes, obviously, you do have to check because this is on a case-by-case basis, but oftentimes, you will find that there are a lot of companies who are very accommodating in terms of helping young people who are joining their apprenticeships program from perhaps a different city, helping with relocation costs. I've seen some apprenticeship vacancies that have like the salary plus a settling in bonus, which is particularly helpful for those who are, moving to a different city or need to move closer to where the apprenticeship is. So, they shouldn't kind of limit their searches to what is just here. And another reason why that's important is because they will find that there will be loads of opportunities and loads of different job roles and vacancies that they will see in other parts of the country that you won't find as much in London, for example. I've seen some particularly interesting, roles within the NHS that you just don't see as much in London, I think, because a lot of people already come to sort of this part of the country to work. And so I think then there's still a greater demand for labour in some of these other areas. So, for example, the police constable degree apprenticeships, I see them so much more in some of the other regions like Hertfordshire and West Midlands and things like that. So do keep an open mind in that regard. So whenever we mention apprenticeships, people often, their minds go straight to, plumbing, electrical, and some of the other construction trades. And there are many brilliant apprenticeships in those areas, of course, but there are also hundreds of new apprenticeships in exciting areas that you may not even know exist. The range is just honestly amazing. And this slide just gives you just a little taster of what kinds of things that your child could potentially do. You could become a first officer pilot through a degree apprenticeship. Architecture is something that you can also do through a degree apprenticeship. Civil engineering, mechanical engineering, software engineering, accounting, business management, project management. You can become a solicitor as well, journalism, nursing, midwifery, so many more things. So it's really important to, for us to kind of move away from this mindset that apprenticeships are only for certain roles. Having said that, of course, there are some professions and some roles that aren't as represented within apprenticeships at the moment, or perhaps are not as suitable for apprenticeships at the moment. So, for example, if your child wanted to do medicine, wanted to become a doctor, they would still need to take the traditional academic route. And, sometimes once you start getting into your more creative arts subjects, you can find that they're a bit more scarce compared to some of these other industries that are dominating apprenticeships at the moment, but still there are loads of options to choose from. And equally, the range of employers that are offering apprenticeships, is just as incredible. This slide just shows you some of, the big employers, companies and brands that you'll recognize in England who are offering great apprenticeships. Now, about 50% of apprenticeships that you'll see will be with large companies like this, but then the other half will also be with smaller local companies. And it can be tempting to think that the best apprenticeships are just with the big well-known companies, but a lot of the smaller companies, smaller employers have excellent apprenticeship schemes that actually would enable your child to really kind of fast track their career progression, because, for example, there's not as much competition as far as other apprentices that they would be joining with. And so it's really important, really, the main thing is just that your child does as much research as they can, and not to kind of limit their, to cast their net as wide as possible, basically. And they'll also need to think about the different roles that a company might have. So it's important that they look inside the company. So what I mean by this is they shouldn't focus only on companies that specify in the fields that they want to go into. So for example, let's say if your child wanted to work in a tech-based role, they don't only need to look at what tech companies are offering. Or if they wanted to pursue a legal career, they don't only need to look at what law firms are offering. They can work within they can work in the legal department in a tech company, or they could work as a software engineer within a sales company, and so on and so forth. So it's really important, again, to remember that all of these companies have so many different opportunities outside of the kind of the field that they specialize in. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay, so I'll just quickly go through the levels of apprenticeship. So we've got 4 kind of apprenticeship levels. You've got intermediate, advanced, and degree. Within those 4, the level of use the number at the bottom where it says level 2, level 3, level 4 to 7, 6, 7. Those are the levels of the qualifications that you would be doing in that apprenticeship. So an intermediate apprenticeship would offer a level 2 qualification, which is a GCSE's equivalent. Then the advanced apprenticeship would offer a level 3 qualification, which is A levels equivalent. And then you go on to your higher and degree apprenticeships. And the kind of easiest way or simplest way to convey this is level 4, 5, and 6 can be seen as equivalent to first, second, and third year of university. But if we look specifically at the qualifications that you would get from a level 4, that could be a higher national certificate or higher national diploma. A level 5 would either be a level 5 higher national diploma or a foundation degree. And then a level 6 would be your bachelor's degree, and level 7, the master's degree. So those are all the levels of apprenticeships. Now, the level that your child will do will depend on, one, the level that they're at the moment. So if your child is doing their GCSEs and they were thinking about doing an apprenticeship after doing their GCSEs, they would be looking at, aiming for an advanced apprenticeship. They wouldn't be qualified yet to apply for a higher or degree apprenticeship. So they would look for the A-level equivalent, basically. Having said that, you may have some children who don't have, even after doing their GCSEs, perhaps are not ready to go on to an advanced apprenticeship, or maybe don't have some of the requirements. And so there are intermediate level 2 apprenticeships that they can do as well. And you will still find loads of different professions that you can access at level 2. For example, accounting, you can start as an accounting assistant at level 2 and then work your way up. So the good thing about apprenticeships is that it does really cater to a wide range of abilities and entry level points. And then if you had a child who perhaps has done a level 3 or done A levels and BTEC, and they're thinking about doing an apprenticeship after that, then they would be looking at higher or degree, anything between level 4 and 5. The level that they choose is determined now by which job or which field they want to go into. There is a tendency for young people to think, well, all my friends are going to university, so if I'm going to do an apprenticeship, it has to be a bachelor's degree apprenticeship, because that's the only thing that I'll consider. But I want to make sure that I kind of point out here that different roles, different industries, different professions require different qualifications, and it doesn't make either of them less prestigious or less viable than the other. So, for example, you have people who perhaps are interested in working in politics. They want to work in the government, around policy, that kind of thing. And so they think, okay, I'm going to go and do a politics degree at university. Meanwhile, if you look at the employers of those roles, so let's look at the government civil service, and the roles that the apprenticeships that they have around policy, the policy officer apprenticeships, excellent apprenticeships that literally give you streamline your kind of progression into policy and governance. The qualifications of those that you need to do for that apprenticeship is a level 4 policy officer qualification. You could go to university and do a politics degree, but that's not necessarily what you need to work in policy. It's the same thing with working in a science lab. If that's something that perhaps you have a child is interested in working in a science lab, doing that kind of practical side of science and chemistry, you will find that a lot of the apprenticeships for those roles, the qualifications that they need are their level 5. So foundation degree, applied science. They could go to university and do a 3-year bachelor's degree in a particular type of science, but when it comes back down to employability, ultimately they will still be going into the same roles or at the starting point that an apprentice has already started at and gained the qualification that they need to do that role. I hope I explained that clearly. This is probably the most kind of complex part. It will get easier after this. And then of course you've got a master's degree, which is something that they can do after having completed a higher or bachelor's degree. So there are many different ways that apprenticeships can be delivered. It will differ depending on the organisation and the training provider that are providing the apprenticeship. So when I say training provider, what I mean is they are providers of education who they specifically provide these qualifications. So they're not necessarily a college, they're not necessarily a school or a university, but they provide these sort of professional qualifications and are accredited to do so. So depending on which training provider the company has partnered with for that apprenticeship, or if it's a university or college, the way it's delivered will look different across the board. But ultimately, we're currently in the middle of a pandemic and lockdown. So at the moment, everything has kind of reverted to online learning anyway. But outside of that or before that, you would see a bit more of a variance in terms of how it could be delivered. So how do apprenticeships compare to full-time university? I mean, I think I've covered most of this. I'll just mention that yes, doing a degree apprenticeship will take longer than doing a full-time degree, because doing a full-time degree, it will take 3 years, but if you're working and doing it part-time, then it will take you, likely 4+ years. But even though it does take longer, it's not time lost. You're still getting your salary throughout those years. Sometimes the salary is even going up. Not only that, but it's not just years of learning, but also years of experience within an industry, which will really kind of help to get them ahead of the game and compete very, very well in the job market. So I just had a look at some current vacancies at the moment in your area. Within 5 miles, I just kind of used the postcode of Bexley Council, and within 5 miles you've got 50 vacancies, and then within 10 miles that kind of goes up quite a lot to 242, and then so on and so forth. You might see 20 miles and think 20 miles is a long way away, but you'll be surprised there are some some opportunities that might be 15-20 miles away, but it doesn't take as long to get there because the transport routes are quite good. Not only that, but people do travel far for really great opportunities. There are people who commute in from places like Reading and into London every day, but make sure whenever whenever your child is looking or considering an apprenticeship opportunity, of course it needs to be something that feasibly, realistically, they can get there on time. They need to get there at 8:30 in the morning. Does the local transport in their area actually, would they, if it's going to take them 2 hours, do the trains even start running at 6 a.m. or not, that kind of thing. So it is important to make sure that they're keeping that in mind. So this slide just shows a range of vacancies that I could find in loads of different professions. So these are just some examples of some current apprenticeship vacancies. So as you can see, there's such a wide range, from engineering to accountant to ground worker, IT technician, paralegal, marketing and events, business development executive. And, like I said, this is just a snippet of what I could get today. There's so much more. You can see there in the third column, it tells you the qualification that they would be doing. And then you've got there in the last column, it tells you the salary that they would be getting. As I said, sometimes that's the standard salary, sometimes that's just the starting salary. So yeah, whilst we don't want to be too focused on money, and an apprenticeship opportunity is about so much more than how much they're getting paid. It's also important to consider that for some people, the next steps that they take, having income is a huge priority, and that's okay. For some people, and not even just for some people, in the economy that we live in currently, these are things that we need to consider when we are, when our children are making the decisions about what am I going to do next, what step am I going to take next for my future. They often think about, is the next step that I'm going to take, will it help me to achieve my academic goals? Will it help me to achieve my career goals? But it's also okay to consider, okay, but will this help me to achieve my financial goals? That, I was talking to someone, a young man recently who is looking for an apprenticeship, and there was one which, he progressed, I think, to interview stage, but he saw the salary. It was quite a low paid opportunity, and he said he did the maths, and it was lower than how much he needs to cover his rent and all of that stuff. So it is completely fine for people to make financially smart decisions about the next steps that they're going to take. So do just bear that in mind as well. And yeah, this is just, again, looking at higher and degree vacancies. You've got level 4, 5, and then your bachelor's degrees. One question that I do often get asked by students is, do Russell Group universities do degree apprenticeships? And they absolutely do. Obviously not all of them currently, but there are a lot that do, and you can see some of them here on this example, Warwick, Queen Mary, University of London. I know University of Kent do as well. So loads of, a lot of these universities that these young people want to go to, they do offer degree apprenticeship opportunities as well. So just keep an eye out for that. And in terms of finding an apprenticeship, so a really, really good place to start is the Gov Find an Apprenticeship website. So you can just type in Find an Apprenticeship into Google, and it's the .gov.uk website. Loads of vacancies will always be on there. And when your child starts searching, it's good to encourage them to even start looking from now. If they're ready to apply, if they're in year 11, if they're in year 13, then they're going to want to start looking at vacancies from now throughout the year. Applying for an apprenticeship is not the same as applying for, college or university. There isn't a set deadline for when applications for all apprenticeships open and close. They come and go throughout the year, just as general job opportunities do. We've just got the list for the high-end degree vacancy listing, which has just come out, which shows all the high-end degree vacancies for the year across the country. So I will make sure that I send that, but you can literally find that online on the Amazing Apprenticeships website. But yeah, encourage them to start looking now, even those who are perhaps not ready to apply. Maybe they're in year 10 or year 12 and they still have more left of their education to complete. It's still good for them to have a look at what's out there, to start taking note of the kinds of apprenticeships they might want to do, and then what kinds of things would be expected of them, what the entry requirements are, so that they can begin to work towards it even from now. Where else to look? So the Gov website is really good, but it's not the only place to look. If you can think of any companies, any organizations that they would like to work with, then it would be good for them to look on their website. Not all organizations will advertise their opportunities externally. So it would be good for them to have a look on their website, sign up to their website as well, register on their social media as well. A lot of companies are trying to utilize these platforms to advertise their opportunities. Friends and family as well. It's really good if you know someone who knows of these opportunities and they are able to give your child a more kind of comprehensive and first-hand insight in as far as how to go about applying for the apprenticeship. Is always super helpful. And then Vacancy Snapshot is a really good website to use as well. If you just type in Vacancy Snapshot, it's the first one that comes up. Loads of these companies have provided information on what kinds of apprenticeships they do, what the company benefits are, when to start looking out for their vacancies, and also what they are looking for in their applicants. So if you have a child who said, they want to apply for a Google apprenticeship, you can go onto Vacancy Snapshot, click on Google and find out what are the specific things that they are looking for in their applicants. So it's super, super helpful. And just some final things, as I've mentioned, there isn't just one deadline. So it's important that they stay on top of the vacancies. That's why creating an account is always really good, so that they can get alerts whenever new vacancies that meet their criteria come up. Make sure they sign up to lots of sites, as many as they can, to cast their net as wide as possible. Remember that entry requirements will vary. You might see an apprenticeship for digital marketing with one company that has very high entry requirements, whereas you might see it with another company, digital marketing apprenticeships, that the entry requirements are not quite the same. So it really does vary across the board, but that is a good thing as well, because you'll always find something that your child will be qualified to at least apply to. And of course, the application process will vary. The recruitment processes will look different. Some of them might be 3 stages, 4 stages. So it's important to really be prepared for that as well. So just some final things. How can I tell if it's a good apprenticeship? This is a question that we're always asked, and the answer is that it will be very different and personal to each young person and the employer. But these are just some key things that you can think about. So the first thing is, what are they being paid? So not that they should always go for the highest paying employers, or that the lowest ones are the worst, but it is important to be paid a fair wage. And a fair wage is always an encouraging indicator that the employer is willing to invest in their staff, and how they treat and value their staff. So that is something that's important to consider. Is it a permanent or fixed position? Employers can offer apprenticeships on either a permanent or fixed basis, so do keep an eye out for that as well. Will they support them into employment after the apprenticeship, or is it a fixed term contract where as soon as the apprenticeship is done, that would be the end of their contract? So keep an eye out for that as well. Is the role varied? So oftentimes good apprenticeships will entail the apprentice spending time within certain different departments, so that they're able to gain a wide range of skills and get a feel for exactly what they like doing in the workplace setting. I mentioned training providers as well, who help to provide some of these qualifications. Now, just like schools, training providers also have Ofsted ratings. So do make sure that you check out their Ofsted rating. So if your child sees an apprenticeship they want to apply for, they can find out at the bottom of the vacancy who is providing the qualification. And if it's a training provider and not a college or university, you can check that training provider's Ofsted rating. And then finally, what are the progression routes? So what are the likely progression opportunities? If the employer openly discusses progression, then that's always a good sign that they want to keep on the apprentice no matter what. And also have a look on the employer's website as well. Is it a good employer? Are they a good fit for your child? So just to let you know that there are some more resources that you can help you as parents. So you've got the monthly parents packs, which you can get from the amazing apprenticeships.com. And also we have translated resources in 7 different languages. So do have a look on there. They're all free to access. And yeah, there's loads more apprenticeship resources that you and your child can benefit from on the Amazing Apprenticeships website. I'll just leave that there for a second, because I realized I went through that really quickly in case anyone wants to make a note of that. That's amazingapprenticeships.com. Loads and loads of free resources and information on there. Okay, so just to kind of bring this to a close, we know that this has been a challenging time for young people who are, thinking about what their next options are going to be, and, even for you as parents, supporting them. But it's just know that there is lots of support out there to guide you and help your child to make the right decision. You've got National Apprenticeship Service, National Career Service. Local authorities are always so good and very supportive in helping young people. And just before I take questions, as I mentioned, it is National Apprenticeship Week. So we've got some other events. If you want to find out more about apprenticeships, there are other things that are going on. You've got here the Big Assembly, which is something they do every year. It's a free interactive live stream, and you will be introduced to some real apprentices and employers who offer apprenticeship schemes, and it'll be an opportunity for you to, ask all the questions that you want to ask them. Also, we are hosting some more events as well. This Tuesday, tomorrow, we've got a panel with apprenticeships from Cisco Systems. So if your young ones want to get involved in that, want to take part in that panel, then they should definitely have a look. I will send the Eventbrite link, and yeah, you can speak directly to some apprentices and ask them questions as well. That is it. Any questions?
I haven't seen anything in the chat at all.
Okay.
I think if anybody has any questions, They can email them through to the skills@bexley.gov.uk email address, and then we can forward any on.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, that sounds good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I hope that you found this useful. Please make sure you check out some of these websites and resources that we've mentioned. And, just remember there's a lot more support that you can get from all of these organizations that I've mentioned, your local authorities. But yeah, thank you.